Welcome to a new school year and to our latest EdSource roundtable. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. Back to school has always been a time for hope and for promise about what's to come. Last year posed unique challenges as many California schools returned to in-person instruction after more than a year of distance learning. We quickly learned that returning to the classroom did not mean a return to pre-COVID culture. Teachers and administrators often were juggling new demands and health considerations. Students had to figure out how to navigate this new normal while also still dealing with the traumatic events of the pandemic. And parents, myself included, had to recalibrate our own expectations about what success for our children looked like. The list goes on and on. What's more, the struggles of the past school year did not abate as the year went on. The second half of the year for many proved as stressful as the first half. As we kick off a new school year, how are the social and emotional needs of students who are struggling in the classroom being met? And how can we ensure teachers are supported and prepared for when it comes to classroom management? EdSource would like to thank the California Endowment for making today's roundtable possible. Now for our introductions. First, I'd like to welcome to our panel Rachel Andrews, a mental health and wellness counselor at Redondo Union High School. Please also welcome Gina Gray, English teacher at Middle College High School in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Next, I'd like to introduce Sarah Kirby Gonzalez, a 4th and 5th grade teacher at Mather Heights Elementary in Folsom Cordova Unified. She's also a member of the school board at Washington Unified in West Sacramento. I'd like to also welcome Mike Patterson, who teaches automotive technology at South Tahoe High School and Lake Tahoe Unified. And lastly, I'm happy to introduce Eric Roundzen, principal at Fruitvale Junior High in Bakersfield. Thank you also to all of those working behind the scenes today who are going to help answer your questions. Our moderator today is EdSource reporter Diana Lambert. Welcome, everyone. And Diana, I pass you the mic.
Thank you. Hello. I'm really excited that we're having this much needed discussion. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to ask the educators on the panel what they're seeing in their schools or hearing from their peers about student behavior last year and so far this year. How's it compared to pre-COVID years? Sarah, what are you seeing?
Thank you. Last year, what I saw was students who came back into the classroom and had not been together for a long time physically. And so that showed up on the playground. Simple things like how to play a kickball game ended up in tears. I had other students who decided they weren't even going to play kickball and they were just done with it for the year. And I had to really rework very basic rules that I normally don't have to do as an upper grade teacher in terms of what do we do when we don't get along on the playground? How do we pass out papers and work together? So really having to start from the basics that we hadn't had to do before. And then in my role working with teachers through National Board, I heard of teachers having a lot of behavior issues as well. And even teachers who are very experienced with a lot of tools in their tool belts, we're struggling to meet their students' needs, and we're just struggling to meet their own needs too as an individual. It was all consuming last year, trying to educate our kids. And as a board member, I saw an uptick in violent behaviors that we had not seen for quite a long time, if ever.
Do you have any examples?
I do. So we are required by Ed Code to do expulsions with students when they bring a weapon and brandish a weapon at school. And there were expulsions that happened last year. And for example, my full-time serving on the board, we'd had one or two. And last year there were multiple that we had to deal with and find resources for students who were expelled. And as a classroom teacher, we were having students say, no, I won't do that, run out of the room, break down in tears, and just really heightened emotions from our kids that we were helping them try to manage through.
Thank you. Gina or Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, when we returned, back into the classroom, learning on Zoom was kind of passive. You just sat there, received information. So being back in the classroom, we had to establish again what community looks like, what collaboration looks like. And we set up those guidelines, took time and practice getting comfortable with sharing space and just expressing ourselves. So it was just a lot of us all learning together what it meant to be in community and learn together compared to before where it was, I got the assignment, I did it on Zoom, I submitted, right? And we had to make those challenges where students were like, just give me the work, I'll get it done and move on, versus, okay, let's learn together, let's share, let's co-construct and do things. And so it was a learning experience for me as an educator, is not used to creating this and dropping it and just getting back into those routines.
So Mike, as a member of the California Teachers Association board, what is the union hearing from teachers across the state about student behavior?
Well, last year was a real challenge, in a lot of ways. Hopefully districts were all following the masking mandates when they were in place, but that was a whole nother level of discipline and classroom management, forced upon our teachers and also our school administrators, which was, really a challenge. This year we're starting school out with a different set of COVID rules from the CDC, which aren't requiring masks, even though I'm hearing a lot of students in many schools are still wearing masks for a variety of reasons. And I'm really hopeful that this school year will be a much better school year for students and teachers and school staff, because hopefully, we don't return to a place where we need mandatory masking. And that just was a whole nother layer of discipline. And, all the teachers I've talked to are very excited to be back in person. We were having a conversation before, and I know a couple of the panelists have back to school night, and they're like giddy because they're going to have parents and students all on campus tonight. So I'm looking forward to a great school year. I actually don't start until next week, but many of my members I work with do. So I'm excited for the new school year.
Thank you. Now the next question is probably the most important. Why? Rachel, can you talk to us about why students are struggling emotionally and what educators can do to help them change their behavior?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Of course, I'm at a high school and we have over 3,000 students, and we saw the same behaviors that you were mentioning, Gina and Sarah and Mike. And a lot of it really boiled down to, the trauma that students went through, experiencing in the pandemic, and then also, of course, untreated traumas from the past. And the trauma that our teachers went through, our staff went through so much, and then coming back and not, knowing what to expect. Like, is this pandemic going to get worse? Is this, just like kind of not really knowing where things were going, having that uncertainty kind of made things really shaky. And so we did see a big uptick in mental health needs with students. We saw an increase in anxiety and increase in depression. And counseling offices were just slammed. And as you know, like the number of students to counselors in the state is just like, there's such big caseloads. So it was just trying to see everybody kind of turned into like an urgent care or an ER situation, trying to help as many students as possible. And so I think a lot of our school-based mental health professionals weren't able to get into the classrooms the way they have in the past to really work alongside those teachers and just take responsibility for all of the children, because the behavior that's happening in the classroom is everyone's responsibility, right? So administrators, counselors, all the support staff, school psychologists, school social workers want to be in there, right? We don't want to be just responding to crisis. We want to be in there in your classroom helping. And so there just wasn't the time for that or the ability to do that. And so I think that was also a big contributor to the behaviors that we were seeing.
So teachers, how do you deal with students who are having behavioral problems in classes? Do you have any de-escalation or redirection techniques you can share? And Rachel, you can chime in here too if you'd like.
I'll share a few as a elementary teacher. One that works well in my room is students have a class meeting jar, and we do class meetings regularly, and they get to lead the discussion. So if there was that kickball issue on the playground, then we know about it and we have a class meeting about it and work to problem solve. And just letting them know, I might not deal with the issue right now, but it's in that class meeting jar, and we're going to get to it. Unless it's something more extreme. And then of course, it's an immediate need, but that has helped a lot. And then also having students see themselves as writers. I find that their writing notebook and our conferences with each other are where some students feel the safest to share with me what's really going on in their life. And so a composition notebook is sometimes magical in a classroom. That's how I've known I need to call CPS or a social worker, and we need to get some more hands and help and support for our students. And so that is one really good tool as well. And never be afraid to show and read a picture book to your kids and then have a discussion about it, because no matter how old our students are, a good picture book can really start a discussion about feelings and working together and dealing with some of those emotions. So there's just a couple.
Thank you. Gina, do you have any?
Sure. I teach at the high school level. So one of the things that I find success with is letting the students have a voice and input into our classroom procedures and routines. So on the first days of school, I don't pass out the syllabus. I don't set any expectations because I get their input. I ask them, why is it important to have routines? What are some benefits to routines? What are some challenges to routines? What do you think will make our learning community successful? And it changes with each module or each period. I have 8 different classes. And so if you see behind me, there's chart paper up because they're having these discussions and they're letting me know what they need. Such as, students are asking for mindfulness in the morning. Ms. G, when we come in, I don't want to get started right away. We can have like 5 minutes? Can we have 7 minutes? I do things that I listen to their input. We used to start the day with mindful coloring. I would give out coloring sheets and crayons. Soon as the bell rings, they would know music was playing and they could just color. And they found that so beneficial before we started the day. And I got that from them. So especially at high school, my syllabus it doesn't stay the same. It changes because every year I have new students in a new community. So I don't want to pass out this document that I made years ago and just keep using it over and over. I get their input. And then when they see it reflected, they feel validated. And then I didn't make these behaviors. I didn't set them. They shared what a collaborative classroom looks like. And so they can keep themselves on task because they know this doesn't help us. This doesn't match the goals that we all set. So they feel connected to it because their voice is in it and their input is in it. It's not my rules. It's not my classroom. It's our learning community. And that's how we progress throughout the school year.
I love that because they have ownership of it because they have their input. I'm at a junior high, and one of the things that we did, when I say we, I mean our teachers and us, we started an advisory class right before COVID started, which starts the day. Every student has the same teacher for both 7th and 8th grade, and it's basically a non-traditional wraparound support class that doesn't really focus on grades. It's not about language arts, math. It's for social emotional learning. It's for students sharing student news, different things like that. So they get to take ownership of it. And that's one of the things that we saw during that pandemic and then coming back was really having this expectation that students knew what our version of respect was. And maybe they didn't, so we had to teach it, right? We had to kind of meet them where they're at and then go from there. And, we would address things as the year would go on. And it was great because those teachers and those students would come to them with some issues. And sometimes there would be issues at home or different things. And then that teacher could advocate for that student with our counselors or our social workers and maybe get them into one of the different groups. One of the benefit of I work at a really small district. We have 4 elementaries. They all feed into my junior high. Is that our district support staff really knows all the schools really well, and they really support us. So we got a district social worker, and she was on our campus running grief groups for kids who really needed that support for either losing people in COVID or just other things. And then boundaries classes, learning how to create boundaries and dealing with conflict, student conflict. Kids have been out of the classroom for so long, they're back together, how to deal with that conflict. So I love the idea of having, students input even more in language arts class. I love it.
Eric, I love that you're prioritizing the group counseling, the tier 2 MTSS services for students. I think that's going to make a huge impact. And Diana, if I might just add one more comment about like a trauma-informed approach to managing student discipline and behavior in the classroom. We find that if everyone takes a trauma-informed approach, it benefits every single student, even if they don't have trauma in their life. And so being mindful of your own self and the journey that you've been on, and being able to recognize your own fight or flight, am I getting dysregulated? Can I stay calm myself and co-regulate? Because when you co-regulate and you model that as an adult, your students can see that, right? And then they can sort of come down in their own behavior to match your own. Also with student behavior in particular, making sure to collect your students so that you have their attention, connect with them, and then correct them, right? That collect, connect, correct, kind of going back to that each time you see those things happening, and making sure to connect and know that they feel that connection before you step into correct can be huge at any age level. So that's what I have found really helpful, and we do have like a body of research behind that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for me at the secondary levels, I try to have really clear expectations and make sure the students have very clear expectations of me. And my classroom rules are quite simple. I only have 3 classroom rules, and you got to remember I'm a CTE teacher, so part of my job is to prepare students for jobs when they leave. So my first rule is you need to be in class, and you need to be in class on time, because the quickest way to lose a job is to not show up or be late every day. My second rule is when you come to class, be ready to work, be ready to learn. And the third rule is to be respectful of other people and other people's property. But we do spend quite a bit of time talking about what those rules mean, how we're going to use those in class. And sometimes I've had classes who wanted to add a couple of more rules to that. But I just try to keep it really simple, get students to buy in. And, I'm pretty lucky. I teach an elective class. So the vast majority of my students, sign up for auto shop because they're interested and, and they want to be in the class. But I think if you just keep it simple, clear expectations, and then if I do have a behavior problem, I try to immediately de-escalate things. And then as soon as I can, find out what's going on, because it's usually not something that's happened in the classroom to trigger that behavior. There's something else going on with that student. And so just the whole social emotional piece has always been important, but is even more important now that we're transitioning to a more normal, hopefully, school year in society.
Thank you. So how do you balance the need to support students who are struggling with social emotional issues that result in behavior problems while maintaining order in the classroom so all students can learn?
I think for me, it's really a balance of building community, having clear procedures and responsibilities, and I always call it building community. The first 10 days, 2 weeks of school, I'm not teaching content. I'm an English teacher, but we are establishing how we want to learn together, what it's going to look like. And I model those behaviors that I want to see. I know that students get excitable. They might have something they want to say. And even if it's something I need to correct, I have a policy where I ask the student to meet me by the door. I always start at meet me by the door. They step outside the door. I'm halfway in and I check in with them. Is everything okay? I notice you're a little, and they can share with me. And it's away from the classroom and everything. And then we can come back. Everyone's on task. But I modeled this so much that I had a student once in class and I noticed that they were a little agitated and I could see something was going on. And she came over to my desk and she said, Ms. G, can you meet me by the door? Because I had shown her that's how we handle things. She didn't have to explode or have anything in it. She could invite me to the door. We could talk. I can see what she needs. And it's something that I model. It's language that I use that's intentional. I don't say what's wrong. How can I help? Are you okay? And everything is around in my room so we can see those procedures to refer back to. If they need to use the pass, they don't have to ask me, can they go to the restroom, or ask me, can they go to the locker? There's a pass procedure, right? I sign the log. I stand by the door. I give the signal, Ms. G, I give a thumbs up. They're responsible. They come back. they feel empowered with all of their actions. So there's no need to have behavior or outbursts because I have procedures in place that show them how they can be responsible, how they can manage those things. And I model the language too. Can I speak to you for a moment? You know, I would like to talk to you after class if that's okay. Things like that really help, especially with high school students, because they're young adults and all students are people and they just want to be respected and heard and validated. So those are my norms. And so it helps because we're all human, we're all learning, and they have structures in place that they feel supported in.
And you put relationship before rigor, right? You spend the time that's needed. And I know that scares so many teachers, especially when you're first out. You have this vast information you need to teach in a year, and you feel, and every day is precious. But I 100% love like what you're doing because you are putting that relationship first. And kids don't learn from kids they don't like, right? So you build that relationship, and that just helps you throughout the whole year, and that culture of respect you create.
These are phenomenal, and I love the theme of knowing your kids and having their voice within it. And what I've learned is that something that works in my room or with this group of kids doesn't necessarily work over there or with my next group of kids we have. And so I had a student last year who, again, through writing and through talking and told me that she had a lot of anxiety when the room got a little loud. And sometimes it would, because we do project-based learning and exciting things. And I learned that, okay, we're going to start the day really calm music, as though Gina was saying earlier. And then I'm going to give her a little heads up when, okay, this is going to be a time when the room is going to get a little louder, but everyone's on task. I'm going to manage it. But if you need to step outside, you can, and do your work right out the door. Or another student, maybe right before you see the escalation coming, the upset, hey, would you take this stack, I give them something heavy of encyclopedias or whatever it might be, to the teacher down the hall. And that teacher just knows if a student comes with a bunch of 5th grade books that they don't need, thanks so much, and gives them a quick job. So I think what has been said here, really knowing your kids, it comes down to. And then if you have folks like Rachel and you have counselors on campus, knowing when, okay, this is beyond what I can do right now in the classroom. And I've been really excited about, in Washington Unified, the high school started a wellness center room where you go in and it's peaceful music. I like being in there. And it's, there's fidgets, there's yoga mats, it's just a really calm place. And it's next to the counseling office on purpose, strategically. And kids come to check in, not to stay all day. And then, kind of refocus and go back. And now we're working on how do we make that happen in elementary schools too. So if you have a student that really needs a break outside the room to kind of regulate, where can that be and how can we make it happen?
Yeah, a question that comes from the audience, and I'm going to expand on it a little bit as a parent as well, and what I've seen. Have you seen any relationship between disruptions in the classroom and attendance, or even disruptions and disruption in instruction? We know that there's been, a lot of shuffling around, and a lot of teachers have been spending their planning periods covering for other teachers. And so when students don't have that continuity, does that feed into more disruption, especially for those students who are struggling?
If I can answer that one, I have definitely seen that. I actually run a wellness center here, Sarah. So that's my role at the high school. I have that space. I'm here at Redondo Union, and it's made such a huge difference. Having that designated space has been really helpful for those particular students, and that you just mentioned, because instead of leaving, getting upset, having like something, altercation in class or confrontation with their teacher, they're not just like storming out of the classroom and then we don't know where they are. They're not just leaving campus and disappearing. They're coming to the wellness center. They're coming to the wellness center and they're decompressing. They're deep breathing. They're using those coloring sheets you like to use, Gina. They've got the fidgets. It smells good. I've got coffee and tea. And there's always a counselor or a therapist there to really like dig in with them and figure out what's going on. And having that and then getting them re-regulated helps them to go back to class and problem solve with that teacher. And if that teacher for some reason doesn't feel approachable, then we have, we sit down together and we craft an email and like, this is how I was feeling. And this is what would help me. And then open those lines of communication. And once those lines are open, we see a huge improvement. We also run attendance groups. So any student that is struggling with coming to school, we have group counseling for them, and anybody can refer them at any time. And so we really work on like, well, what's preventing you from getting to this class? You've missed 3 weeks, you're feeling behind. Well, if that teacher can be flexible with maybe saying, you don't have to do these 3 things, you can do this one thing instead, and working with them, then we can get them back into the class.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, again, coming out of a pandemic and attendance, we also have to understand the expectations, right? Because we had to quarantine, you had to stay away if someone in your family was exposed. So when students were absent and did return, as an educator, I had to make sure that I wasn't like, where have you been? Or, oh, it's a welcoming. Oh, good to see you. How are you feeling? And finding out a way that they can fit in, because you build community from community when you're present. So of course they've been out, they're already maybe unsure, what am I missing? Am I behind? And a lot of times we approach students with a deficit mindset, right? Learning loss, you're behind, what did you lose? And then they take on this pressure too. And so of course we start seeing these type of behaviors. I was absent. So I have a daughter in the 3rd grade. When she was exposed, I had to stay home. Then I had to stay home again with my son in college. So there was just a lot of absences all around. And we just have to be honest. We're okay. And from here, we will move forward. We can't go back. We can never go back. So we're here and we fall forward and we go forward with intention and purpose and grace. And that is how we build community and continue to learn together. I think, perfect attendance right now is a thing that I just cringe at, because that's holding something that we're not responsible for. A student can't control that. We should just not focus on that, but focus on what we could do when our students are in the room, when they are present, and how we can support them there. Because right now, a lot of absences are just really beyond our control and our students' control as well.
Absolutely. And I am very hopeful for this school year. It feels like a totally different year. This is our 3rd day back. We have back to school night tonight. And the kids I feel like the kids came in like a normal year. Last year, although kids were back, was anything but a normal year. Masks 6 feet apart, trying to move desks as furthest apart. We can't do really group instruction as we would want to, because, if you do that, then you might expose. And kind of think of when we started the year, like if you had a kid that was positive and then you sent all these other kids home that maybe had no symptoms, but that was the regulation that we had at the time. So, I feel like now, like, kids are back. We're, doing rallies and different things. And the kids came in with a totally different energy. I didn't feel as much anxiety as last year. It was like, how long is this going to last? And it could just be because I can see everyone's face and they're smiling. And last year I couldn't see that. So I don't know, but I just feel like this year we're heading in a better direction, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think students do much better when there's consistency. And last year was not consistent when, teachers had to be out because of exposure. And then like you had mentioned, whoever doesn't have a class that period is covering the class. And that might go on for a week or two. And, I know a lot of school districts around California had a lot of unfilled teaching positions and unfilled counseling positions as well. And my sense, even though I haven't seen any data, is that is a little better this year. And that's just what I'm hearing from the chapter presidents that I work with. They're not starting the school year with as many openings. And so you don't have subs in there. So I think if the more we can get back to normal and the more consistency our students see, I think the better they're going to do. And it's all about what we do for our students and how much they learn and grow.
Can I say too, I think these are all such valid points in what I'm seeing. And last year I teach Monday through Thursday, and Friday I try to volunteer in the schools where I serve as a trustee. And, I was a PE teacher one day because nobody was showing up. And so I went in to do it. And I was not a great PE teacher because I didn't have a lesson plan. It was an unexpected out and I didn't know anyone's names. And so, we went out, did our PE, and I thought it was over in 30 minutes. And then they said, no, it's an hour. I went, oh no. And so having visiting teachers, even though I'd like to think I can handle a room real well, right? But I was out of my comfort zone. And that is hard on kids, as was said, when you have different people. And so having a good list of substitutes is critical. And what kind of saved us a little last year was we had some phenomenal moms, especially, shout out to dads too, but who signed up to sub and came to the school and they knew the kids. They were there, they were consistent, and that was exactly what was needed for our substitutes. It was really, really helpful. And our classified employees, I think right now need a big shout out too, because if you know your crossing guard, that's a great way to start school, right? When you come on, if you know the cafeteria worker, if you know everyone there, otherwise, if you're like me coming in, not knowing the name in the system, it's a big challenge.
All right. Some teachers say they don't feel supported by school administrators who don't discipline students who are referred to them. And they say the principals are too busy juggling COVID protocols and staffing shortages to deal with discipline. So Eric, can you speak to some of the hurdles that administrators are facing when dealing with student discipline? And what sort of support should administrators offer to teachers?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for the district I'm at and in the school we're at. But yeah, definitely, we're a small district. So my vice principal and myself, we were the contact tracer people making phone calls to all the parents. So yeah, there was a lot more paperwork that we had to do. Obviously, a lot more things involved. And remember, it changed as the year went on. So as things changed, it would change. Behavior was one of those things. We saw an influx of different behaviors. When kids are out and not social for a year and a half, like that's it to be expected. But yeah, what we realized, I'm lucky enough to have a wonderful team of teachers who they have a core belief that we need to meet kids where they're at, social, emotionally, and academically. We need to give kids choice, and we need to give them time to show growth, right? To whatever that growth is, either behavioral or academic. And one of the benefits that I had was I already had a team of teachers that was our leadership team that could bring issues. We meet once a month, but they could also send in like anonymous Google form sheets of things they see. And it could be disruptions. It could have been trash on the playground or on the field, and we could address those things as a group, right? It's not just me trying to like, this is what we're going to do. But yeah, like Sarah said, we did see some major incidents where, suspensions, expulsions, those happened. But a lot of what we realized was we had to teach the expectation and not just assume the student or whatever, if they didn't know what respect meant. Like, we think we know what respect was, but how do we know that the student knows what respect, or what we're calling respect, is? So teaching those fundamentals, and we were lucky enough to have that advisory period in the morning to use. And one of the benefits of the district that I work at is last year we all decided, all the elementaries and us at the junior high, to go with Positivity Project, which is basically, it's a company that teaches social emotional learning. Lessons are already pre-made. They have a lot of different things. Some are videos, some are parent letters, resources, and they're all set up so every teacher can basically, without creating a whole nother workload for teachers to teach SEL. And it was really beneficial. I got a lot of great feedback from our teachers. And then all of the students were on the same page of at least when we say perseverance, this is what we're talking about. When we say teamwork, this is what we're talking about. So I feel like that was beneficial. But I would say the biggest thing is that clear communication, and have staff have a place to go and to talk about the frustrations that they see, and for those to be addressed, but actually have input. And what are we going to do? We're trying this, it's not working. How do we move past it and try something else, right? And I know just from conversations I've had with other people in larger districts, that can be really hard when you're talking about thousands of kids at a school site and multiple administrators. But for us, that seemed to work, because I had a lot of teachers coming up with really great ideas. And sometimes it was adding groups. We were lucky enough to have a district social worker and a full-time counselor on campus, and realizing, we're seeing a lot of kids that are dealing with conflict. They don't know how to resolve it. Like, can we get a group going? And we pull them out of class and have groups and run those throughout the day, once a week. And then we also, as we were coming out of the pandemic, in the sense of like we were coming back to in person, one of the things that I added was an elective, and it was a social emotional study skills class. Basically, think about like we have study skills, like you need help with homework and all that stuff. So this was to teach those tools, to give that wraparound support of whether it's positive coping skills, learning how to deal with your anger, your frustration, how to stand up for yourself, how to deal with friend conflict within the friend group. I had a teacher who did a really great job addressing the issues that, this would probably be like your almost tier 2 or tier 3 group of kids would help. So that seemed to support a lot of our kids who needed extra support.
So teachers, what support would you like to see from administrators when you're dealing with discipline in the classroom?
For me, it's just being respected as the educator and having my voice in the solutions. It is the support that's needed is that mutual respect to say, hey, you're the expert. What does this look like? How can we partner and work together? I do work in a large district, but I'm out of school with a supportive administrative staff so we can have those type of conversations. But I think that same level of respect that we're extending to our students, where we want to hear their voices and we want to validate them, then that has to happen with teachers as well, right? We have to be included in these solutions and respected as the experts that we are, to know, hey, we know what we're talking about. Hey, we have a little expertise here, and respected enough to put things in place. But it's different for every community, every school. This is one thing that is truly not a blanket approach. What works at my school and what works with my students and my population and my community, it works there because we build that, and everyone, I hope that every school team takes that time to know what their school needs, know what their community needs, know what their staff needs, so that they can have those real supports.
I love that, Gina. And I completely agree. Like, all the research says that when you have well-respected, happy teachers, your students are happy too. And they're doing so much better. So I feel like when the administrators really partner with you, like Eric, like you're doing, Eric, you do so many cool things in your school. It is so awesome to hear about that. And I love that you are prioritizing all these different teacher trainings, and completely agree that it would be amazing to put more funding or more priority in training teachers in how to help students with coping skills, recognize mental health warning signs, recognize when a behavior might be coming from a place of a mental health need, and then they can make those referrals and connect them to resources. And then having resources like Eric, you're using your school psychologist and school social worker and school counselor for groups. And I think that's incredible, because when we use these experts for what they're meant to do, like, you can see that difference on your campus. And then teachers aren't alone. They're like, I have just the group for you. I will send you to the counselor. And then we get that kid what they need. And so I think that makes like a huge difference. So thank you.
Well, and at the junior high level, pre-pandemic, junior high has never been easy for anyone, right? No one ever looks back on their life and be like, I would love to do junior high again, right? It's just not. It's the awkward years, and it's hard enough without, go back 20 years ago, it was hard enough. And now you have social media, you have coming out of a pandemic, you have a lot of social emotional issues that are compounded on top of like these kids living through something that no one else has lived through in over 100 years. And, I feel like when they're in a group, they realize that they're not alone, like, especially, and not just like a teacher or a psychologist or someone's there with them, but like other students their age, right? That was kind of the aha for me watching a lot of the groups, was that they realize, like, yeah, they've seen that kid. They might have seen him on the playground or at a class. They've never talked to him, but they're in the same group dealing with whatever the issue is, right? It could be grief. It could be, coping, it could be whatever. And they realize that they're not alone, that they have struggles, but they also have other kids their own age going through the same thing, which I think is powerful because sometimes kids feel so isolated. And the truth is teachers feel isolated. And if we're not opening in those silos, that's one of the worst things I feel like in education is sometimes we get into these silos and it's not where education is meant to be, right? Teachers need support from other teachers, from their administrators. There's that saying out there and I love it. You can't put kids first if you put teachers last, right? You can't. Like we are truly a community and we have to come together like one and work things out. And it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to have different opinions. But as long as we're there with the same goal, right? That's the most important thing. So it's wonderful to watch kids in those little groups discover that themselves, and it just inspires me to see kids do that.
I think one nice thing too, in terms of bringing everyone together, as you're talking about in the groups and the access, is we've had times where you sit down with the administrator and with our special education teacher, with the other grade level team, and with all the folks who are kind of invested. And then we go through every student's name and not just their academic data, which we do, but then also the social emotional data of here's where I'm struggling and where can I get some support. And then getting that follow through is important. I think just really knowing all the kids and having a conversation together, because sometimes your colleague over here has a really good idea of how to serve them that you hadn't thought of, or there's a group that you didn't know about. And I'm really thrilled because there has been an influx of money now that we're feeling in the school district. Last year, we couldn't fill all the positions of some of the social workers and others, but I'm very hopeful with our community schools grants that are coming out and with others. And we've invested heavily where I serve in Washington Unified in social emotional supports. But here as a teacher, it's my first time having one day a week with a social worker on campus. And oh my gosh, that one day we all kind of breathe a sigh of relief, because if I have a true issue, even though I'd love every day, I at least know who I can talk to and go to, which is really important and critical.
And one thing that I would add, and I really appreciate all the comments, is there has to be, buy-in by the entire staff on whatever the discipline policy is, and I mean the entire staff, from the custodian to the principal and everybody in between, because, if you don't understand the process or procedure and there's not buy-in, then it can't work. And so I've had a lot of different principals in my 35-year career, and some of them have tried to implement a totally different discipline policy, which may have worked great, but they didn't include the staff. There was no buy-in. The staff didn't understand it. And unfortunately for the students, they failed. So, it seems like Eric is the type of principal who has buy-in from his staff. His staff is, part of these decision-making, and I'm sure it goes beyond just the teachers. And so I just think it's really important that, we're all in this together. It's all about the students, and we all have to work together and not be given directives that we don't really understand or have buy-ins for.
Yeah, that's so difficult. I agree. Especially if you're trying to, and it's too much work. You're doing it all. If you're trying to do everything yourself, like that's just not going to work. And I think of it as like the classroom. We are trying to teach kids how to advocate for themselves, take ownership of their own education. We became facilitators, right, in the classroom, like coaching them how to do what they need to do. And I feel like the same way in admin, like it can't be top down. You got to have that team around you and full of educators who are professionals. Like they've gotten to this career because they have a passion for what they're doing and for helping kids. So use that as a strength, I always say. And I'm not an expert in everything, so I like to lean on my teachers who are, which is why they're there.
A question, and Rachel, this might be directed at you. Today, Governor Newsom signed the new master plan for kids' mental health. With that comes I think it's more than $4 billion, 40,000 mental health workers. What we're seeing in the chat is what I know you all have seen as well, that there's been an increasing incidence of sadness and depression and other emotional issues among the students. So how can schools, how can you make the most of these dollars? How can the role of the counselor evolve in ways to meet the students' needs?
Absolutely. And so, yes, he signed it today. He made a commitment to adding 10,000 more school counselors in the state of California, which we are just so excited about. And we're excited to see more school psychologists and school social workers, more nurses, and also to partner with community mental health professionals to bring in their services and supports as well. In my role, I'm the bridge between both because I'm a licensed therapist and a school counselor. So I sort of work with the community and mobilize those resources. And so the way that I see it working is people really prioritizing it, right? And their LCAP and their funding goals, really saying, we're going to utilize our counselors to do what Eric's doing, right? More group counseling, more social emotional lessons, more trainings and professional developments created for teachers, more support directly for teachers. In addition to that, partnering again with those therapists to really have those tier 3 supports in place so that if we see a student really, really needs this service, they don't have to go out and walk to a clinic and say oh, I don't have insurance and fill out all this paperwork and whatever, right? Because, we had a student once that she was walking to a mental health clinic and another student saw her and was like, oh, your problems at home must be so bad. And she got so embarrassed, she turned around and left, right? But when you're on campus, right, and you're there and you're a professional that all the students see all the time, you're a part of the school, they tend to trust you more, right? They know that they can go to you and they see your face all the time. And it kind of reduces that whole stigma. So I think having those school counselors around, those school professionals that are mental health professionals, that's going to be huge, because when those ratios come down and we're not seeing caseloads of, when I was a middle school counselor, I had 600 students on my caseload, right? And it was just putting out fires nonstop, right? And I just longed so desperately to get out there into the classroom more and run more groups and provide more services. And so now that I can be in the wellness center and have a wellness center, I'm providing so many services. We saw over 1,000 students last year, 3,000 students. So there's a need and kids will come to you if you're on campus. And so I would love, Sarah, for your school to have somebody there every day. We know from the research that starting in preschool at age 4, if a student gets regular social emotional learning curriculum, that we see huge growth, but not until 9th grade. Sorry, Eric, they skipped 7th grade. It's still the same. But then in 9th grade, all of a sudden we see all these dividends paying off, all these coping skills, all these emotional skills. And we see it in the research. And so I'm really excited for us to be able to actually do what we're meant to do. And so I just can't wait. So thank you, Anne, for that question.
Well, and I've actually seen with our district that I'm in, and it is small, there's only 4 elementaries in me, I've seen the benefits of using a district-wide social-emotional lesson tool, because when the kids now are coming to me, they've done it in elementary for now 2 years. So having the same vocabulary, having the same structure has been a beneficial, because it's not new. It's just, it looks different because it's at the junior high and we structure things a little differently, but they have the same vocabulary, which is huge for most of our kids when we talk about their feelings and different things. So yeah, it's been great.
So Sarah, you have a unique perspective because you're a school board member and a teacher. So what else can state and local policymakers do to help educators with discipline issues?
Thank you for that question. Well, one of the things that we ask for the district is policymakers, you should always be looking at your data, of course, and school districts have the Healthy Kids Survey, which is one tool, but we found we wanted to dig in and have even more. So let's get more survey data from all of our kids and really hear from them, and where are the areas we see successes and where are the areas where there's challenges. And then that's where we look at how to meet those needs. And so I think that our policymakers need to really be asking the school districts for where they're seeing the needs. This community schools grant is so exciting because it is really about meeting the needs of your individual district and not just one approach for everyone. There's an implementation, right, that first comes with it, where you're really doing listening sessions and hearing what your community needs. And so that's the right approach. Things like that are what we need for support. And then understanding that we need, of course, strong salaries to have our folks. We've talked again a lot about teachers, but you need to have good, strong, invested yard supervisors, and you need to have the bus driver, and everyone on campus that's kind of around our kids are all part of this work. And they're all very important to what we do. So I think for our policymakers to really listen to the classroom, I went and advocated as a teacher at the Capitol. And I remember a senator saying to me, well, thanks for sharing with us about this topic. It was teacher evaluation reform. Stay perky. And that's how he ended a conversation with me. And I did not feel heard or valued in that conversation as an educator. And that's why I ran for a school board. But policymakers, don't just listen to your school board and other elected officials. You really need to make sure that you're hearing from the ground of what people need. And listening to their voices. And when they come and talk to you, take them seriously.
Thank you. So this is for the whole panel. Do you feel better prepared this year than last year to deal with student discipline?
I think for me, I feel better prepared, but it's because I have an understanding that there is chaos in this country. There's chaos in our communities. So when I approach my classroom, I'm not looking for a way to manage chaos. I'm looking for a way to create calm, to create community, to balance out those things, because the chaos is what we're looking at as a society, right? We know that it's chaotic. And so we know that it's impacting our students, right? The emotions, the loss, all of those things we can't control outside. But in the classroom is where we can really have that control to make sure that we have things that are calming, nurturing, building community, and really caring for our students. Like I love my kids, all of them. I genuinely care about them and I want the best for them, whatever behaviors they present with, right? And so when that is my lens and that's how I lead, that's how I have a balance. I'm not looking at control. I don't really like order. I like structure. Like, how is this going to work? How are we going to learn? How are we going to grow? And when that is the motivation, and they feel it. And I have the best, a senior who graduated, and she came and told me before she left, she was like, Ms. G, thank you. You weren't a toxic teacher. I was like, you have toxic teachers? That was my first thought, but I just want to say thank you, because then I know it's successful, right? They felt comfortable. They felt validated. And that is what I do every day. So I feel better prepared because I learn from my students. So when I got that feedback, then I make sure I continue to build that way further and further, because I know that's what the students need. They need support, they need calm, they need community. And so that's what I can do in my classroom.
Yeah, I was going to say the fact that student knew toxic teacher as a term, it's just sad, like, because that should not be a thing in their vocabulary. But yeah, I would say I'm really excited about this year. I think we learned a lot through the pandemic. I know for a lot of my teachers, one of the things that came out of it was we didn't realize how much need was in the community, in our community. We started a Fruitvale, which is our name of our district, pantry for families, and our social worker was a really great resource to get them connected to programs throughout our county. And I think that opened up a lot of our eyes. So yeah, I think we are super excited and we're ready. And, you know, behaviors are just another teaching tool. Not to say that there's not consequences with behaviors, but I believe that a lot of my teachers, they use that as another learning opportunity for a lot of our kids. So, but yeah, we're in day 3 and the kids are super excited. There's like this great energy. I don't feel the same anxiety as the start of last year. So that's a really exciting place to be.
Yeah, the toxic teacher term is like all over TikTok. So I think that's where they're grabbing it from. I hear about that all the time. And one of the things is like when they feel like their teacher just doesn't like care about them. So one of my colleagues does this amazing thing that all the students rave about. And she has a little Google form link like on her Schoology, Canva, wherever students can easily find it. And it's like, do you need to tell me something? And so a student might just fill out the form real quick and say, my dog died, so I'm kind of sad, so I might put my head down on my desk today. And so she acknowledges that, but it doesn't have to be a big thing where you're approaching her and having this conversation. It's very non-threatening, very easy for them. That's been like a great tool for students to feel connected to teachers and not feel like they don't support them. I'm also super excited for this year. I think this is amazing, the 10,000 extra counselors. There's also this new grant program where anybody doing a PPS program of any kind can get $20,000 grant. And so if you are a teacher and you're like, maybe I want to be a counselor, maybe I want to be a social worker, psychologist, you can go back to school now as long as you commit to staying in the state of California for 2 years to help our students. Then you get that $20,000. So I am just very hopeful for the future.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I say I'm very excited about the school year. In talking to a lot of the teachers that I work with, there's much less anxiety this year as there was last year. And the anxiety last year was, starting the year teaching virtually and then maybe shifting to hybrid, but also concerned about, their own safety and the safety of, their loved ones who they lived with, not knowing, what COVID could be transmitted in their classroom and how severe it could be. And so I just think, it's exciting. I'm hearing from so many of my members that are just so excited to start the school year in person. And that anxiety is a lot less because the number of teachers we've lost the last couple of years is mind-boggling. And so hopefully we can end that. And I think people not being anxious and being back in the classroom with their students is a huge step towards stabilizing our teaching force.
We probably have time for one more question, Diana.
And I'm glad that Mike brought that up because my next question was going to be, what are the social emotional supports for teachers who are struggling? Are there any?
I think truly, sorry, I know, Rachel, you're an expert in this, so I'll go right to you. But sometimes we say as educators, you're being told, oh, go do this calming app and go do this. And you know what we really need sometimes? We need something taken off our shoulders and something taken off our plate because it becomes one more thing. Here's a survey to do, but I'm not going to give you any time to do it. Here's this to do, but figure it out. And so I think sometimes the best thing you can do is if we can just take a little something off their plate so that they can that is as a teacher what I know I would really appreciate, and I think many of my colleagues say as well. All right, I'll let the others jump.
I 100% agree with that but sometimes there are things that just get put on me and it has to go to the teacher. So what I try to do as a site principal is I build in my budget for sub days for our teachers, for my department, so they can get things, so they can plan, they can look at data. Sometimes, and if they need more, they need more. And then that's usually when I just ask for forgiveness from the district. Like, I'm sorry, I went over. Is there anything I can do? Just because I know that there are so much now that in the last 20 years has been added onto every teacher, whether you're in TK or in 12th grade. So yeah, whatever we can do to support them in giving those teachers what they need when they need it, just like we do with students, meeting the kids where they're at. Well, we got to meet teachers where they're at. So I 100% agree.
Gina,
I
saw you
completely agree with that.
acknowledging. Yeah, and I saw Gina acknowledging yes on taking something off the shoulders, and so maybe Gina and then Eric.
Yeah, I just
going into
sub.
sub.
That's so true. That's so true.
Sorry, Gina. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We both get excited because we're like, yeah, like this is it. It's the demand on the teacher, right? And so it feels so fake when it's like, oh yes, take care of yourself here, but dump, right? Add more to your already heavy shoulders, your full plate. So really looking at things that could come off of a teacher's plate, looking at the time that we have and understanding that this is the time. Don't expect teachers to continue to work these 24 hours and well beyond, because all of these things respect that teachers, in order to sustain, we really have to have balance between our work and our life. and it's not happening that way. And because of so many things, so anything that could be taken off of the plate and removed is really what teachers need and value.
Yeah, I would say
Rachel,
go into
you have
the
the last
class
word.
I would say go into the class to sub too, because if that teacher has a really tough time with one particular student and they're not connecting with them and there's behaviors, you can go in, you can take over for that class for a little bit as an administrator. They can go out and do a restorative walk with that student, spend that one-on-one time to connect with them, and that will make a huge difference. So I think giving the teachers the tools, the time, the space, the respect that they need, and meeting them where they are will help so much with student behavior. Thank you.
Well, we are at the hour, and I'd like to thank all of our panelists for such a great discussion. Really, I think it was solutions-based. I think everyone is coming into the new school year with a glass half full mindset, at least on this panel. It's great to hear. Eric, good luck tonight with your back to school night. Thank you to the audience, to our audience for asking questions and engaging with us. Thanks to all of you behind the scenes helping answer questions, and have a great Thursday.